Lando Norris has received a massive threat from his teammate Oscar Piastri, who is slowly but surely building a case of one of the best rookies to have entered F1 as a sport. With the youngest duo on the grid raising McLaren's performance through the roof, the chances that we're going to see Norris depart the team sooner rather than later, amid the positive pressure of Red Bull that is working behind his mind and his teammates' recent surge of performance, have increased through the roof. So, will this be a scenario that we'll witness in real life very soon? And if so, how will this impact the careers of these young superstars? Now, ever since Austria, McLaren have been on a steady rise, and it seems like they're not planning to stop anytime soon. While Spa seemed to be a hurdle that they found it hard to overtake, mostly because of Piastri's dive bomb in turn 1, the podium finish on the sprint race, as well as the 11 thousandths of a second deficit compared to Verstappen for the pole position, have made a very promising and steady uprising for the young Aussie. And now, he's looking to capitalise on these good results and dethrone Norris from the #1 spot in McLaren. This is a mission that's going to be much harder said than completed, especially given the fact that Norris has been part of McLaren ever since 2019, and he's outperformed teammates like Sainz and Ricciardo, even though the battle with Sainz has been mostly equal. But the dominance that he showcased against Ricciardo has raised his status to a superstar, and 2 consecutive P2 finishes in Silverstone and Budapest respectively have made him even a stronger case of being the alpha male in McLaren. However, this scenario might change very soon. Oscar Piastri has been labelled as one of the best rookies to have entered the sport, and while what Hamilton did back in 2007 is not comparable to anyone out there, it's safe to say that the circumstances were vastly different, as the McLaren back in 2007 was the most dominant car on the grid. Furthermore, Piastri became the only rookie to have led a race in the last decade, knocking one more milestone in his early career. And while many were mocking him to have picked McLaren over the safe seat in Alpine, he's gone to show everybody wrong with his stellar performance in the last couple of races. This has raised the attention of the alpha teams on the grid, such as Red Bull, and while Norris might think that there's nothing he should be afraid of, the situation is quite the opposite right now. In a very strictly regulated technical and financial era, the dominance that McLaren found over a couple of upgrades seemed to be the best solution for both drivers. But we must never forget the fact that Norris admitted to feeling threatened by Piastri more than he did by Ricciardo, which was the first move that made us think that the young Brit superstar could be on the move sooner rather than later. Recently, he's spoken about this situation yet again, and he did not deny that a potential move to the Austrian team is not going to happen, as he went on to elaborate. Of course, there are talks with other people from time to time. You always ask yourself the question, what's best for my career? After all, I want to win races and win world championships. There have been talks with Red Bull. They're a team that's been in the top 3 for years, but that just shows even more how much confidence I have in McLaren. Although there were talks, I felt McLaren was better for me to achieve my goals. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, because Oscar Piastri threatens to drop a bombshell on Norris in 2 separate fields, more precisely on 2 separate fronts. Red Bull didn't show interest in Norris solely, as Marco spoke that the performance of Piastri didn't go unnoticed, and he's been put on the radar as the potential replacement for Perez from 2025 onwards. To this, Piastri replied that he's flattered, but just like Norris, he commented that he wants to continue the voyage with McLaren just because it seems like the Woking-based squad is providing solid ground for developing his talent even further. This would be the first scenario in which Norris should be afraid of Piastri, and the second one would be the more humiliating one, being beaten in his own team by a rookie or a driver in his second year. If Piastri continues with the uprising form, then sooner rather than later, he'd be up there with Norris fighting for podium finishes and potentially even dethroning the Brit from the position of being the alpha male in the team. Now, the perks of having 2 very young drivers in a team is that you can always see who has more potential and talent to exploit the maximum out of the car. But the cons are that this often sparks flares that are not that easy to diminish. Just look at what happened in the same team we're talking about right now in 2007. Even ANDREA STELLA, the team principal of McLaren, couldn't contain his excitement and said that whenever you see an expectation turn into a material, then you cannot help but be a bit impressed. Remember, only a small amount of bad luck prevented Piastri from reaching the podium in Silverstone, and whenever McLaren was competitive, both of the cars were up there. The case was different in Spa though, where Piastri managed to extract more out of the car, especially in the second sector. But that was mostly due to the fact that Norris sustained damage on his floor. Still, this shows that Piastri can always be there to take over the lead whenever that's asked of him. And right now, Norris is the one that should be afraid of the challenge that the rookie is currently representing himself to be. If you think about it, Piastri is one of the few rookies to have made it to F1 straight after F2. And those who did usually had and currently have great starts and careers on their way. Not to mention the fact that he's won the F2 as well as the F3 championship, so he doesn't come with a lack of competitiveness. And not to throw shade to Sargent, but he barely picked up the super license point in the last race of the season last year to get to F1, if we're to compare both of the rookies. Oscar Piastri has spoken about the increased competitiveness with Norris as he went on to elaborate. "I don't want to just be close to Lando, of course. I want to try and beat him. It's been nice to be so close, but until you're beating your teammate, you're always going to feel like there's more to come." Well, to add fuel to the fire, Oscar Piastri's manager, one of the biggest reasons for him currently having a seat in Formula 1, has talked about his younger compatriot's motivation in the sport and what seems to be the ultimate goal for him in the foreseeable future. Although still very young and at the beginning of his career, Piastri does not shy away from a proper challenge, and according to Mark Webber, his manager, the ultimate goal would be to knock out Lando's top draw, as he went on to say, "Lando has been exceptional. Lando's top draw, we know that, and Oscar has just held himself in such. Of course, we're all very proud of him. He's had a phenomenal entry in his first year, but being Oscar, he'll continue to work on where he can improve and keep getting better." As a rookie, Piastri currently holds 34 points in the Drivers' Championship, and that number would have been racked up much higher had it not been for the accident in Spa. Still, this highlights one of the most important things that a driver needs in order to overcome another driver in the same team: experience. Even though Norris is still young, he has 4 years more experience in the F1 category compared to his teammate, and his decisions are usually what differentiates him from Piastri in terms of dominating the ladder as of now. However, the increased speed with which Piastri is catching up to Norris is something that we should be very well aware of, and whether the situation is about a transfer to Red Bull or knocking the horns in McLaren, the battle between these two is going to be fierce. Piastri doesn't seem to look like a guy who will back down from any challenge, and you don't get to win F3 and F2 championships without any previous talent and hard work. He's been proving his haters wrong since day one after his move to McLaren, and the constant praise he's been receiving from his team boss ANDREA STELLA only goes to show that he's here to stay, not to be sold to the best bidder. So, in your honest opinion, will Norris withstand this challenge, or will we see Piastri become the new alpha male in McLaren? Let us know in the comments down below.